The knock at the door. It was early morning in Lisbon, when the silence of an exclusive neighborhood was shattered by the sudden arrival of police vehicles. Witnesses described the scene as surreal. Several black SUVs, accompanied by uniformed officers, pulled up quietly outside one of Ronaldo's luxurious properties. The officers did not move with aggression but with precision. Their steps were firm, their faces unreadable, as they approached the gates. The knock at the door was not just on wood or steel. It was on the very foundation of Ronaldo's carefully constructed world. Inside, Ronaldo was said to be preparing for a normal day. A training routine, perhaps a family breakfast, maybe a call with his lawyers or business managers. But that routine was shattered as the door opened and the unexpected unfolded. Shock inside the house. Eyewitnesses later recalled that Ronaldo's staff appeared stunned. Security personnel, who had spent years keeping fans and paparazzi away, now stood powerless as law enforcement entered with authority. The officers explained their purpose calmly but firmly. Ronaldo was required to come with them for questioning. The words were polite, but the meaning was devastating. Imagine, for a man who had controlled every aspect of his public image, every detail of his routine, suddenly being told he no longer had control. Ronaldo reportedly remained calm, but the weight of the moment was clear. His face, usually so confident, carried the tension of a man stepping into the unknown. The escort. When Ronaldo stepped outside, the flash of cameras blinded him. Somehow, the press had already caught wind of the operation. Photographers scrambled over each other, their shutters clicking furiously, desperate to capture history in the making. Ronaldo, dressed simply, walked with quiet dignity. There were no handcuffs, a sign of respect, perhaps, or recognition of his cooperation. But the symbolism was unavoidable. Cristiano Ronaldo, escorted by police, was now a man under suspicion. Neighbors gasped from their balconies. Children cried as they watched their hero led away. Some shouted words of encouragement. "Stay strong, Cristiano." Others stood in stunned silence, unable to process what their eyes were witnessing. The SUVs pulled away, and with them, the greatest footballer Portugal had ever produced disappeared into the machinery of the justice system. The journey to the station. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was tense. Ronaldo sat in the back seat, flanked by officers. For a man who had traveled the world in private jets, limousines, and luxury cars, this ride was unlike any other. There was no freedom, no comfort, no sense of control. What did he think about in that moment? Perhaps about Georgina and the children. Perhaps about his mother, surely already in tears. Or maybe he thought about the countless cameras outside, capturing images that would haunt him forever. The drive to the station was short, but to Ronaldo, it must have felt like an eternity. Every passing street was a reminder of the country he had given so much to. Now, that same country was leading him into custody. Arrival at the station, the convoy pulled into the police headquarters, where reporters had already gathered in a frenzy. Microphones thrust forward. Voices shouted questions that Ronaldo did not answer. The scene was chaotic, like the arrival of a head of state, except this was not a celebration. It was humiliation. Inside, the process began. Ronaldo's details were recorded. He was led into a room away from the chaos, where the legal protocols would unfold. The officers remained professional, treating him with respect, but the message was clear. Here, he was not a superstar. He was just another man under investigation. The waiting room. Those who caught glimpses of Ronaldo during this time described him as composed, though visibly strained. He sat quietly, hands folded, eyes focused on the ground. To the outside world, he was the epitome of strength and confidence. But in that moment, he was vulnerable, uncertain, human. Hours passed. Papers were filed, procedures followed. Each step was deliberate, slow, and heavy with symbolism. For fans outside, time seemed frozen. For Ronaldo, each tick of the clock was a reminder that his freedom, his reputation, and perhaps even his legacy hung in the balance. The media circus. While Ronaldo waited inside, the world outside spun into chaos. News outlets from Spain, Italy, England, and beyond had dispatched reporters to Portugal. Broadcasters speculated endlessly, replaying the same few clips again and again. Some framed the arrest as a national tragedy. Others hinted at scandal. But all agreed on one thing. This was the biggest story in sports, perhaps in celebrity culture altogether. Memes flooded social media, some mocking, others sympathetic. Rival fans used the moment to taunt, while Ronaldo's loyal supporters fought back with passion. Streets in Madeira and Lisbon saw spontaneous gatherings of fans holding up his jerseys, chanting his name, demanding his release. That it wasn't just an arrest. It was a global event, a cultural earthquake. Ronaldo's silence through it all. Ronaldo said nothing. There were no statements, no tweets, no posts on Instagram. For a man whose life had been broadcast to millions through every possible channel, this silence was deafening. But perhaps that silence was also his strength. Words could be twisted, emotions could be misinterpreted. By saying nothing, Ronaldo allowed the world to speak for him. And they did, in countless voices, some in anger, some in sorrow, some in blind faith. The first night, as evening fell, Ronaldo remained in custody. The police station, now surrounded by fans holding candles and banners, became the epicenter of global attention. Helicopters hovered above, reporters worked through the night, and the internet buzzed with speculation. Inside, Ronaldo was shown to a holding room. It was not a prison cell, but it was far from the comfort he was used to. The walls were bare, the bed simple, the atmosphere heavy. For the first time in his adult life, Ronaldo was forced to sleep not as a champion, not as a global icon, but as a detainee. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Memories of triumphs flashed before his eyes. The goals, the trophies, the celebrations. But now, those memories felt distant, almost unreal. The reality was here, in this room, in this moment, in the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring. The world reacts across the globe, reactions poured in. Former teammates expressed disbelief. Coaches urged calm. Rival players, though silent publicly, were said to be watching closely. In Portugal, debates raged on television talk shows. Could this be the end of Ronaldo's career? Was this a misunderstanding? Or was it something darker? Politicians called for transparency, while fans called for his freedom. In Riyadh, where Ronaldo had recently continued his career, supporters gathered outside stadiums with banners of solidarity. In Madrid, real fans lit candles outside the Bernabeu. In Manchester, chants of his name echoed outside Old Trafford. It was a strange paradox. In his darkest moment, the love for Ronaldo had never burned brighter. A legend in question. As midnight passed, one truth became clear. Cristiano Ronaldo was no longer just a football story. He was at the center of a drama that transcended sport, a saga that combined fame, law, and human vulnerability. The world's eyes were fixed on Lisbon, waiting for answers, but answers were slow to come. For Ronaldo, the greatest battle of his life had just begun. Not on the pitch, not under stadium lights, but behind closed doors under suspicion, with his freedom and reputation hanging by a thread. And as he closed his eyes that night, exhausted but unbroken, the question remained. Would tomorrow bring justice or deeper despair? Cristiano Ronaldo, a man who had conquered stadiums filled with tens of thousands, who had lifted trophies before roaring crowds, who had inspired generations with his relentless drive, now found himself in a place he had never imagined. Behind bars. It wasn't the kind of jail reserved for hardened criminals, but for Ronaldo, it was prison enough. 2 days, 48 hours that would feel like an eternity. 48 hours that would test his strength, his dignity, and his very sense of identity. The holding cell was small, no more than 4 meters wide, with a narrow bed, a metal sink, and walls that echoed with silence. For Ronaldo, who was accustomed to sprawling villas and private jets, the space felt suffocating. The air was heavy, the lighting dim, and the sound of a creaking door in the corridor served as a constant reminder that he was no longer free. There was no luxury here. No silk seats, no gourmet meals, no personal trainers. Just the cold, unfeeling reality of confinement. He was offered a plain meal, bread, cheese, and water. For a man whose diet had been carefully curated by nutritionists for decades, it was jarring. Yet he ate in silence, not because he was hungry, but because he needed strength. The first night's struggle, the first night was the hardest. Lying on the thin mattress, Ronaldo stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fluorescent light above him. He had endured pressure before. Finals, penalties, hostile crowds, but nothing like this. On the pitch, he was in control. Here he was powerless. Sleep didn't come easily. Each time he closed his eyes, flashes of his career filled his mind. The roar of Old Trafford, the chants of Madridistas, the embrace of Georgina after a hard-fought victory, his children's laughter at home. Now, instead of cheers, there was silence. Instead of freedom, there were bars. For the first time in years, Ronaldo felt truly alone. The guards whisper, not everyone inside the station treated him like a suspect. One guard, a lifelong football fan, couldn't hide his emotions. When delivering Ronaldo's water, he whispered quietly, "Stay strong, Cristiano. We know who you are." It was a small gesture, a flicker of humanity in a cold place. Ronaldo nodded silently, but inside, those words mattered. Even here, stripped of status, his name carried weight. His life's work still touched hearts, even in the darkest of places. Georgina's agony while Ronaldo endured isolation. Georgina Rodríguez lived her own nightmare. Paparazzi camped outside their home, desperate for a photo of her breaking down. But she refused to give them satisfaction. She stayed close to the children, shielding them from the headlines. When asked where their father was, she gave calm, gentle answers, hiding the storm inside her. Alone in her room, though, she wept. Her partner, her strength, was sitting in a cell, and she could do nothing to change it. Night, she prayed, clutching Ronaldo's jersey as if it were a lifeline. She knew he was strong, but even the strongest need someone to believe in them. She believed, fiercely, unconditionally. The second day, the second morning began like the first. The clang of a door, the heavy footsteps of guards, the emptiness of confinement. But something inside Ronaldo had shifted. He realized that while he couldn't control the situation, he could control himself. So he did what he had always done in moments of adversity. He trained in the small space of his cell. Ronaldo dropped to the floor and began push-ups, then sit-ups, then squats. The guards watched in silent amazement as the 40-year-old legend turned a cell into a gym. Sweat poured down his face, but with each repetition, he felt stronger. He refused to let confinement break him. For Ronaldo, this was more than exercise. It was defiance. The walls could contain his body, but not his will. Letters of support. Meanwhile, outside the station, fans gathered in greater numbers. They held up banners that read, "Justice for Cristiano." They sang songs of support, their voices echoing through the streets. Some even delivered letters and gifts to the station. Flowers, handwritten notes, children's drawings of Ronaldo scoring goals. The police could not deliver them all, but a few made their way into his hands. Ronaldo read them carefully, his eyes softening. Messages like, "You are our hero. Stay strong. Portugal stands with you. We believe in your innocence." For a man isolated in a cell, these small tokens became a lifeline. They reminded him that outside these walls, millions still believed. Conversations with the officers during his questioning. Ronaldo remained calm and respectful. He answered every question directly, offering documents and clarifications when needed. The officers, while professional, couldn't ignore the fact that they were speaking to one of the most famous men alive. One officer later admitted privately. He never raised his voice. He never complained. He just wanted the truth to come out. It was not the behavior of a guilty man. It was the behavior of someone determined to endure the storm, knowing the sun would rise again. The world watches while Ronaldo battled the hours inside. The world outside spiraled into chaos. International news outlets broadcast live updates. Fans across Europe lit candles in vigil. In Brazil, Argentina, and even rival football nations, banners of solidarity appeared. Yet not everyone was supportive. Critics used the opportunity to question his character, to suggest that perhaps the image of perfection had always been an illusion. For every banner of love, there was a headline of suspicion. The divide grew sharper. Ronaldo's legacy was on trial, not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. The second night was quieter. By now, the initial shock had given way to grim acceptance. Ronaldo sat on his bed, exhausted from the day's questioning and exercise. But he wasn't broken. He thought about his children. He thought about how he would explain this to them one day, how he would turn this dark chapter into a lesson about resilience. He thought about Georgina, her unwavering loyalty, and how her strength gave him strength. And he thought about football, the game that had lifted him from the streets of Madeira to the peaks of global fame. The game that still awaited him when this nightmare ended. With those thoughts, he finally slept. Not peacefully, but with determination that the release looms unbeknownst to Ronaldo. Negotiations were underway for his release. Lawyers worked tirelessly, presenting evidence, clarifying misunderstandings, and pushing for his freedom. The police had no intention of holding him indefinitely. But the process took time, and time moved painfully slow as the world speculated. As fans prayed, as critics sneered, the truth remained hidden inside files and statements. But one thing was clear: Ronaldo's ordeal would not last forever. After 48 hours, the walls would open. The legend would walk free. But freedom would not mean peace. Outside those walls, a storm awaited. Cameras, questions, doubts, and the heavy weight of restoring a shattered image. The man who walked out when the time came. Ronaldo would step out of custody not as a broken man, but as a fighter. He had survived 2 days that would have crushed many. 2 days of humiliation, of isolation, of doubt. But he endured them with dignity. For some, those 2 days were a scandal. For Ronaldo, they were a test of spirit, of resilience, of identity. And though he would walk free, the story was far from over. The real battle had only just begun. For 48 hours, Portugal, and indeed the world, had held its breath. Cristiano Ronaldo, the face of a nation, the legend of football, had spent 2 days behind bars. Rumors ran wild, theories multiplied, and emotions overflowed. But now the waiting was over. The doors would open. The legend would walk free. Yet freedom would not be simple. Outside those walls, a storm awaited. Dawn of the third day, the morning sun broke through the clouds over Lisbon. Fans had gathered through the night, holding candles, waving Portuguese flags, and chanting Ronaldo's name. Some had even camped outside the police headquarters, refusing to leave until they saw him free. The media was everywhere. Dozens of cameras lined the street, helicopters hovered above, and microphones were pointed toward the entrance. Anchors rehearsed their lines, preparing for the moment that would dominate the headlines across the globe. Cristiano Ronaldo's release. Inside the building, Ronaldo was told what he already suspected. He would be leaving that day. The words were delivered with official detachment. But for him, they carried the weight of salvation. After 2 long days of silence, of confinement, of reflection, he would step back into the world. The paperwork of freedom before the release. There were formalities. Documents were signed, statements confirmed, conditions outlined. It was not a full exoneration, not yet, but it was freedom. Lawyers stood by his side, ensuring every line was correct, every word precise. They knew that in a case like this, even paperwork could shape the narrative. Ronaldo remained calm. His body language was controlled, his eyes focused. He understood that the hardest part was not the paperwork, not even the 2 days behind bars. The hardest part would come after, when the world demanded answers. The walk to the doors at last. The moment arrived. Guards led him down the corridor, past locked rooms and echoing footsteps. The hallway seemed endless, each step heavy with anticipation. For Ronaldo, it was the longest walk of his life. Not to the pitch, not to a trophy ceremony, but to freedom under the harshest spotlight of all. As he approached the main doors, the noise outside grew louder. The chants of fans, the shouts of reporters, the whir of cameras. It was a storm of sound waiting for him. The doors swung open. The explosion of cameras, the instant Ronaldo appeared. The street erupted. Flashbulbs blinded him, voices collided in chaos, and the crowd surged forward. Fans screamed his name, some in joy, some in anguish. Reporters shouted questions in Portuguese, Spanish, English, and Italian. Cristiano, are you innocent? Cristiano, what really happened? Cristiano, how do you feel after 2 days in jail? He didn't answer. Not yet. His lawyers had advised silence, and he knew that one wrong word could be twisted into a weapon. But his silence was not weakness. It was power. He walked with his head held high, shoulders straight, eyes fixed ahead. He was no longer the man in the cell. He was Cristiano Ronaldo again. Not broken, not defeated, but resilient. Georgina's embrace waiting near the vehicles was Georgina Rodríguez. Cameras captured the moment she rushed forward, her face filled with emotion. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly as though to shield him from the world. The embrace spoke louder than words. It told the world that no matter what accusations or doubts swirled around them, their bond remained unshaken. For Ronaldo, that hug was more than comfort. It was fuel. Georgina whispered something in his ear, unheard by the cameras, but visible in the way his eyes softened. It was a private message of love in a very public storm. The journey home. Ronaldo and Georgina entered a black SUV, flanked by security and lawyers. The convoy pulled away slowly as fans pounded on the windows, chanting his name. Some wept openly, reaching out just to touch the car as it passed. Inside the vehicle, Ronaldo sat in silence, his hand gripping Georgina's. He glanced out the window at the sea of supporters. For all the chaos, for all the humiliation, one truth was clear. Millions still believed. Millions still loved him. The drive home felt surreal. Streets he had known for decades were now filled with banners, chants, and flashing lights. He was no longer just a footballer. He was the center of a national drama, a figure at once celebrated and scrutinized. The fortress of home. When the convoy reached Ronaldo's residence, security tightened, paparazzi swarmed the gates, helicopters buzzed overhead, and reporters shouted into cameras, desperate for any glimpse of the star. Inside the gates, though, there was peace. The moment Ronaldo stepped into his home, his children ran to him. They clung to him, unaware of the full weight of what had happened, only knowing that their father had been gone and now was back. Tears welled in Ronaldo's eyes as he held them close. For all his trophies, for all his fame, this was his greatest victory. To be back with his family. The first words that evening, the world waited for a statement. Speculation reached fever pitch. Would he speak? Would he remain silent? Would Georgina speak for him? Finally, as night fell, a brief message appeared on Ronaldo's official social media accounts. It was simple, dignified, and direct. I am home with my family. Thank you for your support. The truth will always come out. Nothing more. No explanations, no details, just a statement of faith and resilience. Within minutes, the post had millions of likes and comments. Supporters flooded it with messages of love. Critics dissected every word. But one thing was clear. Ronaldo had spoken, and he had done so on his terms. The media frenzy. The next day's headlines were relentless. Ronaldo released after 2 days. Hero or villain? Portugal divided. Cristiano breaks silence. The truth will come out. Talk shows debated endlessly. Some praised his composure. Others questioned the meaning of his words. Psychologists analyzed his body language. Fans dissected the tone of his statement. Every detail was magnified, every gesture examined. Yet through it all, Ronaldo remained silent. He let the world talk. He let the noise swirl around him. He focused on his family, his training, and his path forward. The emotional aftermath behind closed doors. Though, the emotional toll was immense. Ronaldo was strong, but he was human. The humiliation of being arrested in his own country, of spending 2 days behind bars, weighed heavily. At night, he spoke quietly with Georgina, reflecting on the ordeal. He wondered aloud about his legacy, about the way his children would remember this moment. She reassured him, reminding him that truth and love would always prevail. His mother, Dolores, called constantly, her voice trembling with emotion. To her, he would always be her boy, her pride, her gift to Portugal. She urged him to stay strong, to keep fighting, to never let doubt win. A nation's debate across Portugal. The debate grew louder. Some hailed his release as proof of innocence. Others demanded answers. Politicians called for transparency in the investigation. Fans argued passionately in bars, cafes, and online forums. But one thing united them all. No one could ignore the story. Ronaldo's arrest and release had become more than a scandal. It was a moment in history, etched into the fabric of the nation. The road ahead, though he was free, Ronaldo knew the battle was not over. Questions remained. Allegations lingered. The eyes of the world stayed fixed on him. But he also knew something else. He had survived. 2 days behind bars had not broken him. The storm of media had not silenced him. And with his family by his side and millions of fans still chanting his name, he was ready for whatever came next. Ronaldo's release was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test not just his reputation, but his spirit. And as the world watched, he prepared to fight. Cristiano Ronaldo was free. 2 days of confinement had ended, the gates had opened, and the legend had returned to his family. But freedom did not mean peace. In many ways, the true battle had only just begun. Because while the cell doors had closed behind him, another door had opened, the relentless, unforgiving door of global media. And this storm would be unlike any Ronaldo had ever faced, a world obsessed from Lisbon to Los Angeles, Riyadh to Rio. The arrest and release of Cristiano Ronaldo dominated headlines. Newspapers splashed his photo across front pages, often with words heavy in implication. From hero to suspect, Ronaldo's darkest hour. Icon under investigation. Television networks aired round-the-clock coverage. Analysts who once debated tactics and goals now dissected Ronaldo's facial expressions, his silence, his brief social media statement. Every frame of video, every word spoken by his lawyers, every rumor whispered online. All of it was magnified 1,000 times. For days, it felt as if the world had stopped spinning, consumed entirely by one man's fate. At the divide among fans, the football community was split down the middle. Loyal supporters defended him fiercely, declaring his arrest a conspiracy, a misunderstanding, an attack on their hero. They flooded social media with hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Ronaldo, a hashtag FreeCR7, hashtag We Believe in Cristiano. But critics, rivals, and skeptics found new energy. They called him arrogant, untouchable, too powerful for too long. Memes mocked him, rivals taunted him, and online trolls delighted in seeing the mighty humbled. For every banner of support, there was a post of mockery. For every chant of love, there was a whisper of doubt. The world of football was at war with itself. And at the center of it all was Cristiano Ronaldo. Sponsors in panic. Ronaldo wasn't just an athlete. He was a brand worth billions. His face appeared on advertisements for sportswear, watches, airlines, hotels, and countless other products. He wasn't just selling football. He was selling dreams. But dreams are fragile in the age of scandal. Behind closed doors, corporate meetings turned tense. Executives debated. Should they stand by him? Should they distance themselves? Should they remain silent until the storm passed? Some companies released cautious statements. We are monitoring the situation closely. Others went silent, avoiding association until clarity emerged. For Ronaldo, it was a new kind of pressure. On the pitch, his performance had always silenced doubters. But this was not about goals or trophies. This was about reputation, trust, image. And one misstep could cost not millions, but billions. Rivals rejoice. Not everyone saw the scandal as tragedy. For rivals, both clubs and players, the situation provided ammunition. Whispered jokes spread in locker rooms. Rival fans created chants mocking his arrest. Stadium banners appeared with cruel slogans. It was the nature of sport. Rivals delighting in each other's downfall. But for Ronaldo, it cut deep. He had built his career on respect, on being feared and admired in equal measure. Now, even his name was being used as a punchline. But if there was one thing Ronaldo had proven throughout his career, it was this: he thrived on pressure, on doubt, on criticism. For him, mockery was not destruction. It was motivation. The social media storm. Ronaldo's brief statement, "I am home with my family. The truth will always come out," became the most discussed post of the year. Within 24 hours, it had millions of likes, tens of millions of comments, and countless interpretations. Supporters read it as proof of innocence. Critics saw it as vague and evasive. Analysts debated its wording, its timing, even the choice of photo attached. On platforms like Twitter, debates turned into battles. Fans defended him with passion bordering on obsession. Critics accused him of hiding behind silence. Influencers and celebrities weighed in, some with messages of solidarity, others with thinly veiled criticism. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a global conversation, one in which everyone felt entitled to a voice. The emotional weight behind closed doors. The weight of the fallout pressed heavily on Ronaldo's shoulders. He trained as usual, disciplined, focused, relentless, but even during workouts, his mind wandered. Every notification on his phone, every call from his management team, reminded him that this battle was unlike any before. At tea dinner with Georgina and the children, he smiled for their sake. He laughed with them, played with them, made sure they felt safe. But when the house grew quiet, when the children were asleep, the mask slipped. He sat in silence, staring at his phone, scrolling through the endless storm of headlines. Some brought him comfort, others brought him pain, but all of them reminded him that he was no longer just fighting for his career. He was fighting for his name. The return to training days after his release, Ronaldo appeared publicly for the first time at training. Cameras swarmed as he arrived, photographers jostling to capture the image. Cristiano Ronaldo back on the pitch. His expression was serious, determined. There were no smiles, no casual waves to the crowd. He laced his boots, stepped onto the grass, and began drills with his teammates. Reporters noted the intensity of his session. Every sprint seemed sharper, every shot harder, every movement filled with purpose. It was as if Ronaldo was saying to the world, "You can doubt me, you can mock me, you can try to break me, but I am still here, still fighting." Still Ronaldo. Silence as a weapon in a world demanding answers. Ronaldo chose silence. No interviews, no press conferences, no clarifications. Just discipline, training, and family. His lawyers handled the legal side. His team managed the business side. Ronaldo himself focused on what he knew best: preparation. Some critics accused him of hiding. Others praised him for his dignity. But either way, his silence only fueled the fire. The less he said, the more the world speculated. And perhaps that was his strategy all along. Because Ronaldo understood one truth better than most. Storms pass, but legends remain. Georgina's strength throughout it all? Georgina remained by his side. She posted photos of family dinners, children playing, quiet moments of love. Without directly addressing the scandal, her message was clear. Their family was united, unbroken, unshaken. For Ronaldo, her presence was invaluable. She absorbed some of the media attention, shielded their children from the chaos, and reminded him daily of what truly mattered. When the world doubted, Georgina believed. And that belief gave Ronaldo strength. The global stage. The scandal was no longer just a Portuguese story. It had become global. In Madrid, fans held rallies outside the Santiago Bernabéu, demanding respect for their former hero. In Manchester, banners of support appeared outside Old Trafford. In Riyadh, chants of "Cristiano, Cristiano" echoed across stadiums. But the scrutiny was global too. Every international broadcaster covered the story. Late-night hosts joked about it. Newspapers in countries far removed from football culture ran stories on their front pages. Cristiano Ronaldo was no longer just a footballer under investigation. He was the biggest headline on the planet. The future in question. Behind the spectacle, serious questions loomed. What would this mean for his career? Would sponsors return or retreat permanently? Would clubs stand by him or hesitate to associate their brand with his name? Most importantly, what would history remember? Would this scandal fade as a footnote in an otherwise glorious career? Or would it become a permanent stain on his legacy? For Ronaldo, the answer was clear. He had spent his entire life proving doubters wrong. This would be no different. The storm was fierce, but he was fiercer. Closing scene of the fallout. As the first week after his release came to an end, Ronaldo stood on the balcony of his home. The night sky stretched above him, quiet at last. The chants of fans, the shouts of reporters, the chaos of cameras. All of it faded into silence. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool Lisbon air. For 2 days, he had been behind bars. For a week, he had been at the center of the world storm. But as he looked at the stars, one thought burned inside him. This is not the end. This is the beginning of my fight back. And with that, Cristiano Ronaldo, scarred but unbroken, prepared for the battles still to come.